The silence of space had never felt so deafening. Sarah Lightstorm stared through the viewport of the abandoned space station, watching debris drift aimlessly across the vacuum. Twisted metal fragments, once proud warships of the galactic forces, now nothing but space junk. The pale green hue of her skin reflected in the reinforced glass as she pressed her forehead against the cold surface, her breath creating small clouds of condensation. The galactic forces, an alliance that had maintained peace across multiple star systems for millennia, had fallen in less than a standard solar cycle. What remained was chaos, scattered survivors, and the haunting emptiness where civilization once thrived. Sarah's slender fingers clutched a small metal insignia, the emblem of her former rank as a GF lieutenant commander. It meant nothing now, nothing except memories of failure. Her team had been obliterated during the final stand at Proxima Station. She alone had escaped, though escaped felt like the wrong word. Perhaps condemned to witness was more appropriate. Her current objective was simple: survive. Find others. Perhaps eventually rebuild something from the ashes. But every passing cycle dimmed that hope further. The station's lighting flickered again, another power fluctuation. Resources were dwindling. Soon, even this temporary sanctuary would become uninhabitable. Sarah had perhaps 3 cycles left before she'd need to find another hiding place, another temporary home among the ruins of a once mighty civilization. She was contemplating her next potential refuge when the console behind her emitted a soft, unexpected beep. Sarah spun around, hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. The communications array hadn't received a transmission in over 60 cycles. The screen displayed a faint signal, originating from a sector marked expunged in the old GF databases. The message was heavily degraded, but the system had managed to recover fragments. As Sarah leaned closer, her breath caught in her throat. Outpost Alpha, human contingent, sanctuary protocol, coordinates follow. Sarah stared at the word that made her blood run cold. Human. Humans were a myth, a boogeyman story told to frightened younglings. The violent species that allegedly existed before the GF, so unstable and destructive that they had either annihilated themselves or been removed from galactic records. Some believed they were merely allegorical, a cautionary tale about aggression and self-destruction. Yet here was a transmission, using encryption protocols that dated back to pre-GF era, mentioning humans as if they still existed. Sarah replayed the message repeatedly, her mind racing. If humans were real and still out there somewhere, what did that mean for the remnants of the galaxy? Were they a threat or a potential ally against whatever had obliterated the galactic forces? She paced the empty command center, the decision weighing on her mind. Stay here, conserve her remaining supplies, and eventually die alone? Or follow this ghost signal to a sector that officially didn't exist, chasing legends that might lead nowhere? Sarah looked once more at the drifting debris outside, the monument to what once was and would never be again. Her decision crystallized. If she was going to die anyway, she would die pursuing hope, no matter how faint. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The ancient ship Sarah had managed to salvage, christened Starfinder, hummed with strained energy as she guided it through the remains of what had once been a thriving commercial hub. Finding others had proven easier than expected. Desperation had a way of lowering barriers between strangers. Kodo Orov hunched over the engineering console, his hardened exoskeletal fingers dancing across controls with surprising dexterity. His species, the Turvik, were renowned engineers before the fall. The rough, armored plates covering his body shifted as he worked, revealing glimpses of the sensitive skin beneath. This signal could be anything, he grumbled, mandibles clicking in agitation. Automated beacon. Trap set by scavengers. Echo of something long dead. His skepticism had been constant since Sarah had shared her discovery. And humans? Really? You want to chase fairy tales? From a science station, Mira-san lifted her head. The luminescent patterns on her translucent skin pulsed with excitement. The linguistic patterns and encryption methods are consistent with pre-GF archives, she countered. I've spent my career studying ancient records. If this is a fabrication, it's an extraordinarily detailed one. Ancient doesn't mean human, Kodo retorted. That's quite a leap. But the mention is explicit, Mira insisted, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of her species' intense focus. There are references to humans in the oldest archives. They were real, not mythological. Enough. The gruff voice came from Torin, a towering figure leaning against the bulkhead. The veteran, GF soldier, carried more battle scars than the rest of them combined. Purple-tinged skin stretched over bulging muscles, a testament to his species' evolution on a high-gravity world. Real or not, if they were as violent as the stories say, finding them might be worse than meeting our enemy again. The enemy. They still lacked a proper name for the force that had torn through the GF's finest defenses like they were nothing. Some called them the Scourge, others the Night Reavers. Names didn't matter. Their efficiency and destruction was all anyone needed to know. We've lost everything, Torin, Sarah said quietly. What more do we have to lose by investigating? The rest of their makeshift crew, a collection of survivors found drifting in escape pods or hiding in abandoned outposts, maintained respectful silence. Each carried their own losses, their own reasons for continuing this likely futile journey. Sarah returned to the helm as the Starfinder navigated around a particularly dense field of wreckage. Their destination, Epsilon 13, lay several light jumps away. According to the old star charts, it had been a minor system, uninhabitable ice planets orbiting a dying star. Yet somehow, it had been completely erased from later GF records. Not listed as destroyed or quarantined, simply gone, as if it had never existed. Approaching jump point, Sarah announced. Kodo, is the drive stabilized? As much as possible with these antiquated systems, he replied. But I make no promises we won't emerge as scattered atoms. Sarah initiated the jump sequence. Then we'll be scattered atoms chasing a mystery rather than cowering survivors waiting for the end. The stars elongated around them as the ship slipped into hyperspace, hurling toward either salvation or oblivion. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 cycles and 2 stops later, the Starfinder continued its journey. Their first detour had nearly ended in disaster when a scavenger vessel attempted to board them near an abandoned fuel depot. In desperation, Sarah had broadcast a portion of the mysterious signal, and to everyone's shock, the scavengers had immediately disengaged, fleeing as if they'd encountered something far more dangerous than a handful of refugees in a salvaged ship. They recognized something in that transmission, Mira had said afterward, her excitement barely contained. Something that frightened them more than the prospect of easy plunder. Their second stop had revealed something even more intriguing. In the ruins of a former GF outpost, they had discovered fragments of sealed records, documents so old they predated the standardized data storage of the last 5 centuries. Mira had worked tirelessly to decode them, revealing tantalizing clues about a species called humans who possessed combat capabilities that had apparently terrified the early architects of the GF. Listen to this passage, Mira had told them, her voice hushed with reverence. Their capacity for violence exceeds all rational parameters. When threatened, a single human soldier demonstrated tactical innovations that neutralized forces 5 times their number. Their unpredictability makes them impossible to counter with standard protocols. This isn't mythology, it's a military assessment. Torin had scoffed, but Sarah had noticed the flicker of unease in his eyes. If these humans were real, and as formidable as these records suggested, they represented either their greatest hope or a new nightmare. Now, as the Starfinder approached the Epsilon 13 system, tension permeated the vessel. Sensors indicated the system appeared exactly as ancient records described, a dying star surrounded by frozen, lifeless worlds. Nothing to suggest habitation or significance. Are we certain these coordinates are correct? Kodo muttered, studying the readings with obvious disappointment. There's nothing here but ice and rock. The signal originated from this location, Sarah confirmed. Specifically, the third planet's orbital path. I'm detecting no artificial structures, no energy signatures, Mira reported, frustration evident in her voice. If something was here, it's long gone. Sarah guided the ship deeper into the system, maintaining a cautious approach. The third planet loomed ahead, a massive ice giant with swirling storms visible even from a distance. Wait, Torin suddenly straightened. Something's wrong with our sensors. Malfunction. Kodo immediately began diagnostic procedures. No, Torin said slowly. Too consistent for a malfunction. It's as if something is deliberately obscuring certain readings. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Scan for anomalies in our own sensor arrays. Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. Warning lights flooded the bridge as systems began shutting down in rapid sequence. We're caught in some kind of energy field, Kodo shouted, his exoskeletal plates clicking rapidly in. Distress. Engines non-responsive. Weapons offline. Defensive protocols. Sarah commanded, but the controls beneath her fingers were already dead. The Starfinder drifted helplessly, caught like an insect in amber. A voice, unfamiliar, speaking in an accent none of them had ever heard, crackled through their communication system. This is restricted Terran airspace. Lower your shields and stand down, or you'll be neutralized. You have 10 seconds to comply. The bridge fell silent. The voice continued, emotionless and precise. Your vessel has been immobilized as a precautionary measure. Identify yourselves and state your purpose immediately. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew before responding. This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Lightstorm, formerly of the Galactic Forces. We are refugees following a distress signal to these coordinates. A pause. No distress signal has been issued from this location. We intercepted a transmission mentioning a human contingent, Sarah continued, choosing her words carefully. We seek asylum from the forces that destroyed the GF. Another, longer pause. Then, prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will result in immediate termination. The communication cut off. Moments later, the sensors detected a new presence, seemingly materializing from nowhere. A vessel of unfamiliar design approached, sleek and predatory, bearing no recognizable markings. They were here all along, Mira whispered, mingling with fear. Cloaking technology far beyond anything the GF ever developed. Or they just arrived, Torin countered, hand resting on his weapon despite its uselessness against their captors. Sarah raised her hand for silence, as the airlock indicators showed an external connection being established. Despite the imminent danger, a flutter of anticipation rose in her chest. They were about to discover if humans truly existed, and if the legends about them were warranted. The airlock cycled open, and Sarah found herself face-to-face with a myth made real. The woman who entered was immediately recognizable as not belonging to any known species in the GF catalog. She stood upright on two legs like many humanoid species, but her features were distinct. Skin a pale beige without bioluminescence or natural patterns. Hair silver white and cropped short, and eyes a piercing blue that evaluated the bridge with cold efficiency. She wore a form-fitting uniform of matte black material, with a single emblem on the shoulder, a stylized flame encircled by stars. Two similarly attired figures flanked her, holding weapons unlike any Sarah had seen, compact but radiating an energy signature that made her instinctively certain of their deadliness. I am Commander Evelyn Drake of the Terran Remnant Forces, the woman announced. Her voice matched the one from the communication. You claim to have received a transmission mentioning humans. Explain how. Sarah described the signal, watching as Drake's expression remained impassive. When she finished, Drake exchanged a glance with one of her companions. No authorized transmission has been sent. Either you're lying or... She stopped, considering. Show me this message. Sarah nodded to Mira, who displayed the fragmented transmission. Drake studied it, then spoke rapidly in a language their translators couldn't process to one of her companions. This is a security breach, she finally said, returning her attention to Sarah. This transmission was sent over 300 cycles ago, during the initial exodus. It should have degraded beyond recognition by now. So you are human, Mira-breathed, unable to contain herself. You actually exist. Drake's cold gaze shifted to her. We exist precisely because the galaxy believes we don't. Your arrival compromises that strategy. Why hide? Sarah asked. The Galactic Forces has had diplomatic relations with hundreds of species. A bitter smile crossed Drake's face. That being the operative word. Where's your mighty alliance now? Shattered, I presume, or you wouldn't be here seeking salvation from ghosts. The GF was attacked without warning. Torin interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. Billions dead. Entire systems reduced to debris. And you speak as if their destruction was inevitable. It was, Drake said flatly. Your galactic forces exiled humanity centuries ago, Commander Lightstorm. Decided we were too unpredictable, too dangerous to be included in their perfect cosmic harmony. They were correct about one thing. We are dangerous. But they were wrong to think the galaxy could be sanitized of all threats by removing just one. Sarah struggled to process this information. You're saying the GF banished humans? That's not in any official history. History is written by the victors, Drake replied. Or in this case, erased by the frightened. We were relegated to myth, our homeworlds quarantined, our colonies dismantled. Those who couldn't escape were repurposed. What does that mean? Mira asked, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. It means, Drake said, that the GF extracted what they valued from us, our military strategies, our technological innovations, while disposing of the source. We were too violent for their utopia, but our methods were acceptable when adopted by their own forces. The implications hung heavily in the air. Sarah found herself reassessing everything she had believed about the organization she had served loyally for her entire career. The GF is gone now, she finally said. Whatever happened in the past, we face a common enemy in the present. Drake studied her, the cold calculation never leaving her eyes. And why should we care? The galaxy turned its back on humanity. Perhaps this is merely cosmic justice. Because whatever destroyed the GF won't stop there, Sarah argued. Sooner or later, they'll find you too. Hiding won't protect you forever. You overestimate their capabilities, Drake said dismissively. We've perfected invisibility over centuries of necessity. And underestimate their determination, Torin countered. I watched them track vessels through hyperspace jumps, something previously thought impossible. They adapt with terrifying speed. A moment of tension stretched between them before Drake spoke again. You will be confined to your vessel while we verify your claims and determine your fate. Attempt to communicate with anyone outside this system, and we will destroy you instantly. As Drake turned to leave, Sarah took a risk. Commander, history may not record what was done to your people, but anyone with eyes can see what's happening to the galaxy now. If you have the power to help and choose not to, what does that make you? Drake paused, her back to them. Without turning, she replied, survivors. Something you should understand quite well. Then she and her companions departed, the airlock sealing behind them. As their ship was towed deeper into the seemingly empty system, Sarah realized they had found their humans. But whether they had found allies or simply a different kind of enemy remained to be seen. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Starfinder was guided to what appeared to be empty space near the ice giant's largest moon. Only when they passed through some invisible barrier did a massive structure materialize before them. A space station unlike any GF design, all harsh angles and functional efficiency, without the aesthetic flourishes common to Alliance architecture. Remarkable cloaking technology, Mira murmured, recording everything their sensors could detect. Not bending light or creating a false image. Some kind of phase shifting that places the station partially outside normal space-time. No wonder they've remained undetected. Don't sound so impressed, Torin growled. They could have helped when the GF was being slaughtered. Would you have helped those who exiled your species? Kodo asked, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. I find their response logical if cold. They were permitted to dock, but not disembark. Over the next cycle, human technicians came aboard to examine their systems and verify their story. They worked with silent efficiency, ignoring questions and maintaining impassive expressions. Sarah spent the time reviewing everything they had learned. Humans existed. They possessed technology far beyond what the GF had achieved, and they harbored a deep-seated resentment for the alliance that had cast them out. Mira had been granted limited access to historical archives under strict supervision. She returned to the ship vibrating with excitement, her luminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. The records confirm everything Drake said. She reported breathlessly. The early GF Council voted to exile humanity after a series of conflicts demonstrated what they called irreconcilable differences in conflict resolution approaches. In other words, humans fought too effectively and too ruthlessly for the Council's comfort. So, they were banished for being good at war? Kodo asked skeptically. Not just good, revolutionary, Mira corrected. Human military history shows a pattern of adaptive combat that no other species could match. Where others developed predictable strategies based on their physiological advantages, humans constantly innovated regardless of physical limitations. They turned disadvantages into tactical opportunities. They weaponized psychology as effectively as technology. Sounds like exactly what we need against the Scourge, Sarah mused. Or exactly what we should fear becoming dependent upon, Torin countered. If they help us now, what price will they extract later? Their debate was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Drake, accompanied by two different officers. Her expression remained unreadable as she addressed them. Your story checks out. The transmission you received was sent by a splinter group of humans who disagreed with our isolation policy. They were dealt with long ago, but apparently their beacon continued broadcasting on an encrypted frequency, a testament to human engineering, if not human obedience. What happens to us now? Sarah asked directly. That depends, Drake replied. Our leadership is divided. Some believe you should be quietly eliminated to preserve our secrecy. Others see potential value in establishing limited contact with survivors of the GF. And what do you believe, Commander? Sarah pressed. Drake's cold facade cracked slightly, the first genuine emotion they had seen from her. I believe in survival. And sometimes survival requires uncomfortable alliances. She gestured to a datapad one of her officers handed her. We've analyzed your accounts of the attacks on GF installations. The tactics described are consistent with a threat we've been monitoring from a distance. We call them the Void Collective, a synthetic organic hybrid civilization from beyond the galaxy's edge. You knew about them? Torin's voice rose dangerously. And did nothing? We knew something was probing the outer systems, Drake corrected sharply. We didn't know their capabilities or intentions until they engaged the GF. Even then, we maintained our protocol of non-intervention. Why tell us this now? Sarah asked. Drake's expression hardened again. Because approximately 6 hours ago, our long-range sensors detected a Void Collective fleet altering course, heading directly for this system. The news hit like a physical blow. Kodo's exoskeletal plates rattled in distress. They followed us, he whispered. Somehow they tracked us here. Impossible, Mira protested. We took every precaution, masked our trail at each jump. They didn't follow you, Drake interrupted. They followed the response to your signal. When you broadcasted that ancient frequency to the scavengers, it triggered automated responses from several dormant beacons. Responses the collective apparently detected and triangulated. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crush down on her. In seeking salvation, she had inadvertently led destruction to the very doorstep of potentially their only hope. How long do we have? She managed to ask. At their current velocity, approximately 48 hours. Drake's tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a minor scheduling issue rather than impending annihilation. Which means we have 46 hours to decide. Evacuate this facility and maintain our secrecy, or stand and fight. You would abandon us? Mira asked, her voice small. Self-preservation has kept humanity alive for centuries, Drake replied without apology. But there is disagreement among our leadership about the correct course of action. Some believe this is an opportunity we have waited for, to test our capabilities against this threat in controlled circumstances before they eventually discover our primary installations. You want to use us as bait, Torin realized, disgust evident in his voice. I prefer to think of it as mutual advantage, Drake said coolly. You need our help to survive. We need intelligence on our enemy's capabilities, an arrangement beneficial to both parties. And if we refuse? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Drake's smile was thin and without warmth. Then you are free to leave and meet the Void Collective on your own terms. We will simply relocate our facility as we have done many times before. With that ultimatum delivered, Drake departed, leaving them to consider their limited options. We should leave now, Kodo immediately suggested once they were alone. Find another system, hide, survive, and go where? Torin challenged. If these Void Collective creatures can track signals across multiple jumps, nowhere will be safe for long. Besides, Mira added, you saw their technology. The humans might actually stand a chance against the Collective. This could be the galaxy's only hope. Sarah remained silent, weighing their options. The humans clearly saw them as expendable, test subjects at best, sacrificial distractions at worst. Yet their technological superiority was undeniable. If anyone could stand against the force that had shattered the GF, it might be these cold, calculating descendants of a species the galaxy had tried to forget. We stay, she finally decided, but not as passive bait. If the humans want to use this encounter to gather intelligence, then we negotiate as equals. We offer our knowledge of GF protocols, defensive layouts of the remaining core systems, and tactical data on the enemy's previous attacks. You're suggesting we betray GF security protocols? Torin looked shocked. The GF no longer exists, Sarah reminded him harshly. Our duty now is to the survivors, and that means using every advantage to ensure there are any survivors at all. Her decision made, Sarah requested another meeting with Commander Drake. It was time to transform from refugees into allies, whether the humans liked it or not. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The strategy room deep within the human station hummed with tense energy. Holographic displays showed the approaching Void Collective fleet, 12 ships arranged in a formation unlike anything Sarah had seen in traditional space combat. Commander Drake stood at the center, surrounded by her senior officers. When Sarah and her team had been escorted in, Drake had regarded them with mild surprise. I expected you'd be preparing your ship for departure, she said. We're staying, Sarah replied firmly, but not as passive observers or sacrificial distractions. We have intelligence that could prove valuable in the coming conflict. Drake's eyebrow raised slightly, the only indication of interest in her otherwise impassive face. What could you possibly offer that our intelligence division hasn't already extracted from GF archives? First-hand combat experience against the enemy, Torin interjected. I've faced them directly. Watch how they adapt to different attack patterns. Observed weaknesses your data mining couldn't possibly reveal. And I have access codes to GF emergency protocols that were never digitized, Sarah added, including the location of hidden weapons caches and defense installations that might still be operational. A murmur ran through the assembled human officers. Drake silenced them with a glance before turning back to Sarah. And in exchange, we fight together, Sarah said simply. Not as your subordinates or test subjects, but as allies. And if we survive, you consider helping other survivors rebuild. Not from the shadows, but as active participants in whatever comes next. Drake studied her for a long moment. You're either very brave or very desperate, Commander Lightstorm. Both, Sarah admitted. But I also recognize that isolation is no longer a viable strategy for any of us. The galaxy has changed. Survival now requires adaptation. A ghost of a smile touched Drake's lips, using our own evolutionary advantages against us. Perhaps there's more human in you than we suspected. She nodded sharply. Very well. You'll join our tactical team as advisors. But understand this. If at any point I determine you're compromising our security or effectiveness, you'll be removed. Permanently. The terms established, they turn to the urgent task of preparing for the coming battle. The human facility transformed with astonishing speed from research station to military fortress. Hidden weapon emplacements emerged from what had appeared to be structural elements. The entire station's outer hull reconfigured, revealing armor plating and defense systems far beyond GF specifications. Most impressive was the revelation of the human fleet. Ships materialized from apparent emptiness, their cloaking technology deactivated to conserve power for combat systems. Not a massive armada, but a precision force of vessels designed for maximum combat efficiency. We've never needed quantity, Drake explained as Sarah marveled at the display. Human military doctrine has always emphasized tactical superiority over numerical advantage. How many of you are there? Mira asked, unable to contain her scientific curiosity even as they prepared for battle. Drake's expression closed immediately. That information remains classified. Let's just say enough to ensure humanity's continuation, not enough to be careless with any lives. The Void Collective fleet drew closer. 24 hours. Then 12. Preparations intensified as the deadline approached. Sarah found herself working alongside human tacticians, surprised by their methodical creativity. Where GF military planning had emphasized structured responses based on precedent and extensive simulation, the humans constantly proposed unconventional approaches, challenging assumptions at every turn. Your former alliance always sought the perfect solution, one human officer commented during a strategy session. We recognize there is no perfect solution, only the best bad option in any given scenario. As the final hours ticked away, Drake summoned Sarah to a private meeting. The commander appeared different somehow, not less controlled, but more focused, like a blade honed to its sharpest edge. There's something you should know before battle is joined, Drake said without preamble. If the Void Collective breaches our primary defenses and threatens to overtake this station, I've authorized the activation of the Thanatos Protocol. Which is? Sarah asked, though something in Drake's tone made her certain she wouldn't like the answer. Total erasure, Drake replied, her voice clinically detached. The station, this moon, potentially the entire planet, converted to their component atoms. Nothing for the enemy to study, no technology to reverse engineer, no prisoners to interrogate. Sarah stared in horror. You'd sacrifice your own people to prevent the collective from acquiring our technology? Without hesitation, Drake's eyes were like ice. Humanity learned long ago that survival sometimes requires unacceptable sacrifices. It's why we were exiled. It's also why we still exist. There are alternatives to annihilation, Sarah argued. Escape, regrouping, fighting another day. There are alternatives to immediate annihilation, Drake corrected. But each captured human, each fragment of our technology, increases the long-term probability of complete extinction. The mathematics is quite clear on this point. Sarah struggled to formulate a response to such cold calculation, but alarms interrupted their conversation. The collective had arrived, sooner than predicted, and in greater numbers. They've accelerated, Drake muttered, studying the incoming data on her wrist device, and doubled their force. Interesting, Sarah echoed incredulously. They've committed enough firepower to obliterate this entire system. Drake's smile was predatory, which means they consider us a significant threat, despite having no direct knowledge of our capabilities. They're responding to an unknown with overwhelming force, which tells us something valuable about their tactical doctrine. She strode toward the command center, Sarah following close behind. It also means they're committing resources that can't be deployed elsewhere. Sometimes, Commander Lightstorm, the most effective victory isn't surviving the battle. It's ensuring your enemy suffers disproportionate losses. As they entered the buzzing command center, Sarah wondered if she had allied with saviors or a different kind of monster entirely. Asterisk. The Void Collective struck with the same merciless efficiency that had shattered the galactic forces. Their vessels, massive constructs of biological and mechanical components fused in unsettling harmony, moved with a hive-mind coordination that had overwhelmed traditional GF fleet formations. But the humans did not fight like the GF, where the Alliance had relied on coordinated, predictable patterns refined through millennia of theoretical optimization. The human vessels operated with controlled chaos. They executed maneuvers that seemed suicidal, violating basic principles of space combat that Sarah had studied her entire career. Randomized response matrices, Mira explained, watching the battle unfold for the tactical center. Each ship captain has a baseline strategy, but is granted significant autonomy to deviate when opportunity presents. It's making it impossible for the collective to predict their movements. The humans' cloaking technology proved devastating in combat. Ships would materialize, launch devastating strikes, then vanish again before the enemy could effectively target them. The collective adapted quickly, deploying wide-spectrum energy fields to detect cloaked vessels. But the humans had anticipated this countermeasure and developed counters to the counter. Multi-layered contingency planning, Torin observed with grudging respect. They don't just have a plan, they have plans for when those plans fail. For a time, it seemed the humans might actually repel the attack without significant losses. Then the collective revealed its own surprise. A massive carrier vessel that had remained at the edge of the system suddenly accelerated inward, its hull splitting open to disgorge hundreds of smaller craft. Boarding parties, Drake announced grimly. They're shifting tactics from destruction to acquisition. They want to capture the station, Sarah realized, to study your technology. And they won't get it. Drake's voice was ice. Prepare internal defense teams. And initiate Thanatos countdown sequence. Authorization Drake 7 Echo termination. A cool synthetic voice acknowledged the command. Thanatos protocol initiated. Terminal sequence will execute in 30 minutes unless countermanded. Sarah grabbed Drake's arm. You're giving up already? Your fleet is still fighting effectively. Drake removed Sarah's hand with controlled force. This isn't surrender, Commander. It's ensuring the enemy's victory becomes Pyrrhic at best. If they commit their forces to capturing this station, the rest of our hidden installations gain valuable time. There has to be another way, Sarah insisted. A way to defeat them here and now. I'm open to suggestions, Drake replied coldly. But I won't risk humanity's survival on optimism. Sarah turned to her team. Mira, you've been analyzing their attack patterns. Kodo, you understand their technology better than anyone. Torin, you face them in direct combat. There must be something we're missing, some vulnerability we haven't exploited. As they desperately searched for alternatives, the station shuddered under the impact of the first boarding craft. Internal security alerts blared as human defense teams engaged the intruders. 25 minutes to Thanatos execution, the synthetic voice reminded them. Wait, Mira suddenly straightened, her luminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. The carrier vessel is maintaining a unique quantum signature distinct from the other ships. Almost like a control node, Kodo finished, mandibles clicking rapidly. They're a hive consciousness. The smaller vessels aren't individually intelligent. They're extensions of the carrier. Sarah turned to Drake. If we could neutralize the carrier. We've already targeted it with everything we have. Drake cut her off. Its defensive capabilities are beyond our current firepower. Not from the outside, Torin interjected, but from within. The plan came together with desperate speed. While the collective focused on breaching the station, a small team would take the Starfinder, registered as non-human technology and potentially overlooked by the collective's targeting priorities, and infiltrate the carrier vessel. Once aboard, they would deploy a specialized EMP device modified to match the unique quantum signature Mira had identified, theoretically disrupting the hive connection. It's a suicide mission, Drake stated flatly, as opposed to your current plan of atomizing everyone. Sarah countered. After a tense moment, Drake nodded. Take whatever resources you need. I'll maintain the Thanatos countdown as fallback, but extend it by 15 minutes. That's all the extra time I can risk. As they prepared to depart, Drake pulled Sarah aside. Why are you doing this? You owe humanity nothing. We've made it clear we would sacrifice you without hesitation. Sarah considered the question seriously. Because extinction should never be the first choice, she finally answered. Neither yours nor any species. If we're going to rebuild from this chaos, we need to start by believing there are alternatives to annihilation. A flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps simply curiosity, crossed Drake's face. Good hunting, Commander Lightstorm. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Starfinder slipped through the chaotic battlefield, its outdated GF identification signals ignored by the collective forces focused on the human defenders. Sarah piloted while Torin prepared for boarding action. Kodo had modified their single EMP device, while Mira continually scanned the carrier vessel for potential entry points. There, Mira indicated a section of the massive ship where smaller craft were entering and exiting, some kind of maintenance or deployment bay. The energy shielding reconfigures with each passage. Can we time our entry to match? Sarah asked, hands steady on the controls despite the destruction unfolding around them. Theoretically, Kodo replied, but our margin for error is measured in microseconds. Torin checked his weapon one final time. Then we don't error. They approached the carrier, using debris from destroyed vessels as cover. All around them, human ships executed impossible maneuvers, drawing the collective's attention away from the small, seemingly insignificant vessel creeping toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Now, Mira called as a collective craft exited the bay. Sarah punched the thrusters, sending the Starfinder hurtling toward the momentarily open entry point. For a sickening instant, it seemed they would crash against the reactivating shields. Then they were through, skidding across the organic metallic floor of a vast chamber filled with dormant attack craft. We're in, Sarah announced needlessly. Kodo, how long to prepare the device? 3 minutes to calibrate. Then we need to reach the central processing core, which should be, Mira consulted her scanner, approximately 500 meters inward and 2 levels up. Torin moved to the airlock. Then we move fast and quiet. The moment they realize we're aboard, they'll flood this chamber with whatever passes for their security forces. The interior of the carrier was unlike anything Sarah had ever encountered. Not quite mechanical, not fully organic, but an unsettling fusion of both. Surfaces pulsed with what appeared to be circuitry embedded within living tissue. The air itself felt wrong, carrying scents that triggered primitive warnings in her brain. They encountered surprisingly little resistance as they moved deeper into the vessel. The few collective drones they encountered were easily dispatched by Torin, their movements predictable once engaged at close range. The disruption is already beginning, Mira observed. The human attack must be straining their network. They reached what appeared to be the central processing hub, a massive chamber dominated by a pulsating crystalline structure that emitted synchronized waves of energy. Kodo immediately set to work placing the modified EMP device, while the others established a defensive perimeter. How much longer on that countdown? Sarah asked through their comms. 8 minutes until Thanatos execution, came Drake's tense reply. The station is being overrun. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Devices. Calibrated, Kodo announced. Activating in 30 seconds. Wait, Mira interrupted, her scanner revealing new information. This crystal structure, it's not just a processor. It's a containment system. Before she could elaborate, alerts blared throughout the carrier. Their presence had finally been detected. No time to debate, Torin shouted as the first wave of collective drones converged on their position. Activate it now. Kodo initiated the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystal structure before them pulsed violently, fracturing along previously invisible seams. Energy cascaded outward in chaotic bursts as the ship's systems began failing in sequence. Something's wrong, Mira called out. The reaction is too extreme. This isn't just shutting down their network. It's destabilizing whatever they were containing within that crystal matrix. The chamber shuddered as explosions rippled through the carrier. Through the failing internal systems, they could see the collective fleet falling into disarray, ships colliding with one another or powering down completely. "Get back to ship," Sarah ordered as structural supports began collapsing around them. "Now!" They fought their way back through corridors rapidly decomposing as the carrier's integrated systems failed. The Starfinder remained where they had left it, though part of the landing bay had collapsed, crushing several collective craft. "Drake, we're extracting," Sarah transmitted as they scrambled aboard. "The carrier is destabilizing, possibly catastrophically. What's happening outside?" "The collective fleet is paralyzed." Drake's voice held a note of genuine surprise. "Whatever you did, it affected all their vessels simultaneously. But we're registering energy buildups consistent with a potential cascading detonation. Get clear immediately." Sarah piloted the Starfinder out through the disintegrating bay doors, narrowly avoiding debris as the carrier began breaking apart from within. The human fleet was already pulling back to a safe distance, their coordinated retreat as impressive as their earlier assault. They barely cleared the minimum safe distance when the carrier erupted in a blinding flash that momentarily outshone the system star. The shockwave hit moments later, sending the Starfinder tumbling despite Sarah's best efforts at the controls. When they regained stability and the sensors cleared, they beheld an astonishing sight. The entire collective fleet, dozens of vessels that had brought the mighty galactic forces to its knees, drifted powerless. Some had been destroyed outright by the carrier's destruction, others merely rendered inert, but all had been neutralized in a single stroke. "What do we actually do?" Torin wondered aloud. Myra's expression was troubled as she reviewed the scanner data. I think the collective wasn't just a hive mind. I think it was a prison." "A prison?" Kodo echoed. "For what?" "Something the crystal matrix was containing," Mira explained hesitantly. "Something powerful enough that the entire fleet architecture was designed around keeping it stable. When we disrupted that containment, we didn't just defeat them," Sarah realized. "We freed whatever they were restraining, and it destroyed them from within." The implications hung heavily in the air as they docked once more with the human station. Whatever they had unleashed might eventually prove as dangerous as the collective itself. But for now, at least, they had achieved the impossible. Victory against an enemy that had shattered civilizations. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Commander Drake was waiting when they disembarked. For the first time, her perfect composure showed cracks, a slight dishevelment to her uniform, a barely perceptible tremor in her hands that spoke of the station's recent desperate defense. "The Thanatos countdown has been aborted," she announced without preamble. "Preliminary scans confirm the collective fleet has been neutralized. Those vessels not destroyed outright appear to have reverted to base mechanical function without their controlling intelligence. Which means salvageable technology," Kodo noted, his engineer's mind already calculating the possibilities. "And prisoners," Torin added. "Their biological components may still be alive if their integration with the hive mind wasn't total." Drake nodded. "We've already dispatched recovery teams. But that's not why I'm here." Her gaze fixed on Sarah. "Initial debriefings from your team suggest that the collective's defeat may have inadvertently released something potentially more dangerous." "Explain." Sarah described Myra's observations and their theory about the crystal matrix serving as containment rather than merely control. Drake listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. "So, in destroying one threat, we may have unleashed another," she finally said. "How characteristically human of us, solving immediate problems while creating future ones. If you had executed the Thanatos protocol, we would never have known what we were truly facing," Sarah pointed out. "Sometimes understanding a threat is the first step toward truly defeating it." Drake regarded her thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Or perhaps ignorance is indeed bliss." She straightened, professional demeanor returning fully. "Regardless, the immediate crisis has passed. The question now becomes, what next?" What came next unfolded gradually over the subsequent cycles. The Human Leadership Council, still hidden behind layers of security that prevented Sarah and her team from learning their numbers or true base of operations, debated extensively before reaching a decision. Commander Drake delivered their verdict personally in a formal meeting attended by representatives from both sides. Humanity has existed in isolation for centuries, she began. That isolation was initially forced upon us, then embraced as a survival strategy. Recent events have demonstrated that isolation is no longer tenable. She activated a holographic display showing the known galaxy, with vast sections highlighted in red, territories devastated by the collective. The old order has fallen, Drake continued. The Galactic forces, for all their technological advancement and noble intentions, proved insufficient against an existential threat. In their absence, chaos will reign, unless a new stabilizing force emerges. Sarah felt a chill at the implication. You're proposing humanity steps in to fill that void? Not directly, Drake clarified. We have neither the numbers nor the desire to maintain an overt presence throughout the galaxy. But we can provide guidance, support, protection when necessary. You want to be the power behind the throne, Torin said flatly, pulling strings from the shadows. We want to ensure that whatever rises from the ashes of the GF doesn't repeat its mistakes, Drake countered, including the mistake of believing that peace can exist without the capacity for effective violence when threatened. The proposal that emerged was neither a full alliance nor a continuation of humanity's complete isolation. Instead, Drake outlined what she called the New Covenant, a framework where human advisors and technology would support the rebuilding efforts in key systems, while the bulk of humanity remained hidden, a sentinel force ready to intervene against existential threats. And in return, Sarah asked cautiously. Discretion, Drake replied simply. The galaxy at large continues to believe humanity exists only in legend. Those who know the truth keep our secrets, in exchange for our protection. It wasn't perfect. The arrangement left humans as shadowy guardians rather than full participants in galactic society, a role that made Torin deeply uncomfortable and fascinated Mira in equal measure. But it offered something precious that had seemed forever lost amid the devastation of the collective's rampage. Hope. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. One full cycle later, Sarah stood at the viewport of the newly commissioned vessel Horizon. Unlike the salvaged Starfinder, this ship represented a true fusion of technologies. GF design principles enhanced with human innovations, crewed by a mixture of species united by their shared survival of apocalypse. Commander Drake approached, standing beside her in companionable silence for a moment before speaking. The first outreach missions depart tomorrow. Are your teams prepared? Sarah nodded, as ready as they can be. There's still considerable debate about how much technology should be shared and how quickly. Understandable caution, Drake observed. Power without wisdom is merely a more efficient path to destruction, says the species that nearly atomized an entire moon as their first response to invasion. Sarah couldn't help but note. Drake's lips quirked in what might almost have been a genuine smile. We never claimed to be perfect exemplars of wisdom, Commander. Merely survivors who have learned from harsh experience. In the distance, the first ships of the new fleet were visible, some repurposed from salvaged collective vessels, others constructed in the human shipyards that had remained hidden for centuries. Each carried mixed crews and the distinctive emblem of the New Covenant, a stylized flame encircled by diverse stellar symbols, representing the varied species now aligned under humanity's distant guidance. Do you think it will work? Sarah asked quietly. This arrangement, where humans remain legends to most while secretly safeguarding civilization? Drake considered the question seriously. Legends have power, Commander Lightstorm. Sometimes more power than the truth. The galaxy feared humans as unstoppable warriors, and in their time of greatest need, that legend proved justified. Perhaps it's better if we remain something between myth and reality, present when needed, invisible when not. And if the thing we, unleashed from the collective returns, Sarah pressed, what then? Then humanity will do what it has always done, Drake replied, her gaze fixed on the assembling fleet. Adapt, innovate, survive, and ensure others survive with us. Not because we are inherently noble, but because we have learned the hard way that even the most dangerous species can become protectors when they recognize that some threats transcend old grievances. As the Horizon prepared to depart on its mission of rebuilding and reconnection, Sarah reflected on how thoroughly her understanding of history and of humanity had been transformed. The galactic forces had been crushed, yes, but from their destruction had emerged something perhaps more resilient, an alliance that embraced rather than feared the capacity for necessary violence, guided by those the galaxy had once deemed too dangerous to include. The humans had indeed shown up, and the galaxy would never be the same.